in my short time, just about a year of being in this position as minister, justice minister for the congregation, I have certainly connected often with Open Circle and have found that a real support in my own ministry and appreciate the good work that is done by the people of this community. I'm also honored to be here to share this with Sister Stella Storch, who worked for this position with my community. And it was about 12 years ago when we first worked together to bring awareness to the sisters about the problem of trafficking. And at that time, she had been connecting with a larger group of sisters. So worldwide, it was the sisters were addressing this issue. So I'd like to just address a few topics in this short time. One is sex, just limiting to sex trafficking, talking a little bit about what happens here in Wisconsin, and then what are some of the things that we can do to prevent it or curb it. So most of you maybe know already that Wisconsin is considered one of the hubs of the sex trafficking, that Milwaukee is known as the Harvard of Pimp School. New research that came out in March of this year shows that there were 340 people under 25 that were sex trafficked from 2013 to 2016 in Wisconsin. And it's happening both in rural and in urban communities. Milwaukee, Green Bay is a corridor because of the Highway 43 and Highway 41. And then there's the triangle, Milwaukee, Green Bay, and the Twin Cities. And because of the ability to move around that triangle, it's part of the reason why we have such a high rate of sex trafficking. Recently, adolescents were rescued from commercial sexual exploitation in Milwaukee, and that meant that Milwaukee was tied with Las Vegas for the third highest number of young people rescued during FBI raids across the United States. So unfortunately, we have a huge problem in our own state. The upside is there's also some good work being done to deal with it. Claudine O'Leary is a youth advocate who has worked with young people involved in the sex trade, and she says that Milwaukee's economic disparity is creating a situation with a lot of vulnerable youth. And that could be said around, that's true. Whenever there's economic disparity, it's more likely to have a higher incidence of sex trafficking. 70 to 80% of all trafficking cases are for sex trafficking, and it's currently a $99 billion per year industry. An estimated 300,000 children become victims of sex trafficking every year. Does anybody here know the median age at which people are first invited into this industry? 12, 13, I've saw some different ones, as early as 11 as a median age. But between 11 and 16 is the average age. The youngest victim, it's hardly believable, that has been recovered was 18 months old. When sex traffickers are recruiting people, they look for vulnerable boys and girls. Runaways will be lured into prostitution within about 48 hours of their leaving home. Most do come from normal homes and go to school every day. Parents may be unaware. One girl was talking about, her parents never dreamed, thinking that, that she was part of this promiscuous lifestyle, and she really wasn't. She was in a way, but she hadn't chosen that. She was lured into it. A trafficker will look for a young person who appears on the fringe of the group. the straggler, the one that's not fitting in, the one who's not noticed or involved. And so they will hang around places where youth gather, malls, show houses, and they will look for a girl. Now think about when you were a teenager, or your children were teenagers, or your grandchildren, and how vulnerable that age is just because of the age it is. So what they do is they spend some time first grooming their victims. So they provide attention, affection, and gifts. So that's one of the red flags. If somebody all of a sudden has things that you wonder how they got them, that could be a sign. They befriend the victim. They get a lot of information about the family and friends, and especially the friend or the family member closest to their victim. And then they entice the person to cross a sexual boundary, maybe not a very bad one at the beginning, but they get them, and once they've got them, just once, they have them. Because what they do then is enter into blackmail. So they will give them threats of harm to that, particularly that person that they know now they're very close to, or to the whole family, if they're going to tell. So then the threats are used to get their victims to do more. All the demands now begin to be put upon them because they have something to hang over their heads. The young person may end up working 7 days a week with 30 clients a day. So it's a business, profitable business, and it's a mobile business. So they're often moving from truck stop to truck stop or from place to place. Very often the victims either are asleep or blindfolded, and so they do not know where they're going. If they were able to get to a phone and call, they can't tell anybody where they are. Sometimes their phones are restricted if they have them, their IDs are gone, they really have no way to ask for help. Then prostituted children believe they're worthless and that nobody will want them anymore. So they don't think about escaping or going back home because who's going to take them? So this makes it extremely difficult for them to escape. So a few things about what we might be able to do. First of all, we can educate. We can share the information. There's lots of websites now where you can get information. I have put some things on the table there that give you some other resources and give you some information, but to share it. There's particularly a poster-like thing if you can share it with some place where you may gather or meet. So education, we have to address the demand side. And so I challenge the men here, and particularly in the group, to do your part in the education of fellow men, so that they can begin to change their ways in relating to young people for profit. Certainly, we see that the most vulnerable are the ones who need love and attention. So give love and attention to our young people, our children, spend time with them, listen to them, build up their trust in you so that they would be able to come to you if something occurred. We need to monitor and put controls on children's use of social media. I mean, social media is where there's a lot of this going on. And I'm not that familiar, but that would be something good to research, or what are the medias that young people are using and where they get recruited. Churches, schools, we can provide support systems. So we need to begin to learn a few of the red flags, and I'll just go over a couple of them. And then there's a few more on some of the literature, but there's some things that we observe physically. If they seem to have injuries or abuse, they appear malnourished. In the grooming part, they have everything they want once they're caught up into the system, then they often don't have enough food, they don't have all those amenities that they once had, they may have tattoos. They fear authority figures. They, you know, in a restaurant, if you see an older gentleman with a young girl, particularly if she seems to like be cowering in her place or not talking, if the person always talks on behalf of the young person, if they have lots of phones or lots of hotel keys, you know, some of those kinds of things, if they seem withdrawn and depressed, and what teenager sometimes doesn't seem withdrawn and depressed. But what we can do then is be alert to these signs, and we don't usually address them directly, because that could be very dangerous, but you can call the hotline number, and all the materials that I brought, I think, have that hotline number on, so have it available, so that if you see something, if something is suspicious, you can call, and then they can take it from there. So I hope that you will continue to be interested in learning what you can, sharing the information, and then being alert. Maybe you can be the one to make that phone call just to free someone who is being trafficked. So again, thank you for inviting me to here today, and I'll let Stella share her project.
Before Sister Ruth sits down, please note the beautiful shirt she's wearing, which was made by our girls, so as well as my dress. Thank you, too, for letting me share a program that's extremely important in my life. You've heard the horrors of trafficking, and when I first started working for the Sisters of St. Agnes and learned about trafficking, I was horrified. And I recalled that in 2000, I was in Tanzania visiting a friend and her family, and I remembered meeting some AIDS orphans. And it dawned on me, oh my gosh, these girls are the perfect prey for traffickers. Somebody offering them a job in Europe or in the United States, who wouldn't jump for that? So the program, so I wrote to the sisters and said, is there any way I can be of service in getting a co-op started or something so that these women wouldn't jump at a chance to, you know, a job abroad? Well, what ended up was the Empowering Women's Future, the AIDS Orphan Sewing Project. You'll hear me say several names. This is the project for which I do my work. However, as you will see in the slides, it is a small part of a program called the St. Maria Goretti Organization. That is the 501c3 organization, we'd say corporation, that the Sisters of St. Teresa of the Child Jesus have established in Tanzania that would be comparable to our 501c3. Now, before we get into that, I was going to mention, I hope I have enough rope here, Tanzania is a country, you know, when we think of Africa, well, you probably are educated and know all of this, but we have Tanzania. We have Tanzania just south of Kenya, and what most of us learned in geography is about Lake Victoria, and so because it is such a large inland waterway. Well, in Tanzania, this is Tanzania, and only the southern half of Lake Victoria is in Tanzania. Our city, Bukoba, where our project is located, is right here. So you can imagine all of this is Tanzania, and we are right on the Ugandan border on Lake Victoria, or on, yeah, Lake Victoria. Now AIDS started, it moved from animal to human in Uganda. So Bukoba was overrun with AIDS back in whenever that happened. I don't even remember when. The sisters then started ministering to them, and each year got more and more involved. Now, when I suggested helping them, I of course have no money and had to raise some money for sewing machines. So some of you might remember these dressy scarves, and even other scarves. This was fashionable for only a few years, but I caught that window, sold them for 20 bucks, and that's how we bought our sewing machines. The first thing we sewed was placemats and napkins, and that worked to some degree. Then we made clothing, but they never got a sense of size. I tried to teach them to measure from under one arm to the other arm, and that didn't work. They don't expect people to be as big as I am, as you will see in another slide. So the last project now is bags, batik bags like this. Now that might be more tie-dye, and my dress though is batik, and it was all white, and then with a paintbrush they put the wax on it and then boiled that off. Now they're also making these kind of bags, okay? Now when, oh, I'm forgetting my job here. Oops.
Not working?
Wait a minute, I'm backwards.
Ah,
Scott, you're gonna have to, oh,
there it is.
yeah. So when the girls start, they first of all, this is Sister Monica. She makes patterns, and all the girls learn every stitch that they're going to be making with a sewing machine. They learn how to make it by hand. And this is a booklet. I don't have enough hands. Scott, maybe you could. Oh, I went the wrong way. Yeah, the other, there, no. They learn, yeah, okay, everything by hand. You know, how to do a sleeve and how to put the fabric in there. And this is a sample book you can look at where they have that, okay. Then they have to make their own patterns, because you can't just get a Butterick or a pattern at Joann's. So, go on. And here they have the paper, and then they make the dress. Okay, these are the sewing machines.
Are those pedal machines or electric?
They're treadle, they're pedal, right. These girls you'll hear at the end when they'll get a sewing machine after they graduate after 3 years. We give them a sewing machine to take to their village. Those are all treadle sewing machines. However, in the sewing school, they do have electricity, because otherwise you couldn't put the stitchery on. This is all done with different machines. Those were the first batik bags, hot off the press, and those were the teachers showing them off. Okay, this is one of the sisters helping. When I was there, you know, when you're hungry, a straight seam is not important to you. But for me to sell their items, they have to have straight seams. And so I was in there measuring the width of the handles, measuring the pockets, measuring the linings, etc. They're all lined, and so it really took a lot of effort. In that picture, they were tearing something out. Here you can see again the poverty here, the homes, go on, and then a little better situation. They are the most generous people you can imagine, and this is how they wrap their gift. Those are banana leaves, and this girl brought me avocado. They're just huge. Go ahead. And here's another one with cassavas, and another one. This was, go back one, okay. This was an extraordinary day. I don't know why they particularly chose that day, but every girl came with food, and you see the tomatoes, the pineapples, and the sugar cane. And I had to accept those gifts because those girls had to show me how much they appreciated my work. It was one of the most difficult things I had to do because I knew they were hungry. Look at me, have plenty to eat, and yet I had to accept their gratitude. That is a very difficult thing. It's one thing if it's just a little bit here or there, but when it's so different, it really affects you. And then this is graduation day, and the sewing machine itself is in the package. And it was very important to these girls that I designate this sewing machine is for you. This is for you. They're all the same. They could have just, but for some reason that giving was extremely important to them, and it certainly touched me.
Some of these folks were males, or are they
No,
all?
they're all girls. They do sometimes take, other boys are involved in other things, which I'll show. But this year when I was there, the girls had made these dresses for themselves as graduation dresses. And they had made one for me, which I put back there. And as I tried to button it, it didn't quite work. And so they were willing to make a new top for me. I said, I've got this, shirt, I can put that underneath there. What was so lovely about that was that year I was there was the 50 years of my being a sister. And so they celebrated that, and that's, do you want to go back one? So that's why I have a crown on, and I have that decoration in front of me. I have a boutonniere on, and you can't see this too well, but the girls all have sandals on. And the sisters bought those sandals for them. They just have flip-flops. That's the shoe they wear. But they said that looked so unbecoming with those beautiful dresses. And as you look at that dress back there, they even have covered buttons with the fabric. Okay. These two women are graduates of our program. The one on the left had been a teacher in our school, and she has moved on. And the girl on the right had her own business. And the dress she's wearing, it's a two-piece, she made herself. And she's the one I first asked, are you able to earn a living for yourself and for your siblings? And she said yes. And I have asked that question over and over again. It's a lot easier to fix a problem before it happens. None of these girls has been trafficked for sexual exploitation, and that's the thing I wanted to avoid. And once a girl has been damaged psychologically, physically, emotionally, through trafficking, it's much harder to bring her back than it is to avoid it in the first place. And I'm not aware of any other program that does this. I may very well be wrong. But to avoid the horror of what Sister Ruth explained, that's the purpose of this school. Now, go on. The umbrella group, St. Maria Goretti Organization, has other things that the sisters do for AIDS orphans. For the boys, there's a carpentry school. And okay, go on. And this guy, he wanted his picture taken. I mean, he thought he was Mr. Cool. And he wanted to see it too. Okay. So they have no electricity in this building. And when I first was there, they didn't even have levels, so they were making desks and other furniture. So the next time I went, that's from our local Menards. And they gave me a good deal on taking a bunch of them over there. This is the kind of furniture, despite all those obstacles, that they're able to produce. For this one, they had to get a little assistance with another shop, I think, that had electricity. Another ministry they have is the making of soap. And they make these huge barrels of soap that they have contracts with hospitals that buy from them. And then they also make bars. Now, these will be cut into force yet to make a bar of soap. Go ahead. Okay, still. This is the old-fashioned way they have to do it. The fire under that great big steel drum, and that's how they do it. Okay. They also have a knitting, this is electric, knitting machine. Go on. These are some of the things they knit. They have contracts with the schools, and then they'll get to make those. The same is true with some of the dresses. They make uniforms for some of the schools. Okay, now bringing it back to home. One year, the Fond du Lac reporter did just a super job, and as you can see, I made the front page even. I mean, really. And it had a few pages in it. It wasn't just like now where you have one sheet, you know, but this was a newspaper. The next time I went over, I took a whole bunch with me and had them all read. Well, when they saw their picture in the newspaper, when they saw my picture in the newspaper, it was delightful. Now, on the table back there, I have some copies of the letter that I sent out this May asking for donations. Once a year, I send out about 100 letters to people I know, and it includes an article where I was quoted that included some of these photos even. And what I include this year now is what is a gift card. This has become very popular, where people, instead of buying a trinket, they will make a donation to the AIDS orphans, and they can write their name on here saying a donation has been given on your behalf. And on the back of it, it explains the program, and it also gives the website, which I meant to put on here but forgot. It's very easy. I'd like you to look it up. Remember St. Maria Goretti Organization? It's just simply stmgo.org. And the computer will always want you, instead of that O, to put an A there. And you want to say, no, I want an O. And it'll go right to our program. So, and they have the habit of always, with names and everything, putting a TH where we would put a T. So they will say Maria Goretti Organization. Or like the sister who's now the director, she says Maria, or her name is Margaret, and we'd say Margaret, okay. And then I have just this blank sheet that I invite you to put any questions or comments or names or anything on it that you might want to ask. So I realize I went over as Scott anticipated. But I can't help myself, so thank you very much.
I'm part of the fashion